Hey guys, hope you're having a great day. Welcome to my channel. My name is Scott, and today we're going to be painting the knob on Smasha Squig. Now this model came out recently in the Beast Snaga Army box from Games Workshop, and it has easily become my favorite model from the set. Now, I've done kind of a fun little paint scheme today. We've done a purple belly, we've done some blue armor, and we've had some fun with it. So let's go ahead and dive into how I painted this model. To get us started with this model, I've primed it with Chaos Black Spray Primer. And once that's dry, we're going to start on the belly of the squig using Genesteeler Purple, and I've thinned this with a bit of water to help it spread smoothly across the surface of the model. We're going to paint this on the belly, tail, and head of the squig. We're going to be careful when we're around the head to not allow the paint to pool up in the eyes or around the teeth. We're going to paint all the way up onto the forehead and the jaw of the squig, because we're planning on doing those with tan later. Once the purple is dried, we're going to create a shade using Volupus Pink Contrast Paint. We're going to thin it down with a bit of water. You could also do this with Contrast Medium if you have it available. Now this pink is going to give us a different tone to our purple skin. It's going to help blend it into the red that we're going to be doing later on the squig. It's also going to serve as a guide to help us know where the crevices are in the belly of the squig. Once the pink is dried, we're going to begin layering up the flesh of the belly using Genesteeler Purple and Morghast Bone in a 2-to-1 mixture. And we're going to focus on the raised areas of the muscle and the different rolls of flesh that are on the belly. We're going to really build this up over time, with the end goal being to have Morghast Bone be the outermost layer. This is going to take us a few steps, but it's going to look really cool when we're done. Now as we work our way up towards the face of the model, you're going to see that there's a lot of protruding bones sticking out of his jaw and out of his forehead. We're going to highlight these, trying to focus on leaving good definition between them. We're also going to drive the paint up towards the lip, but not go all the way to the lip, because we want to be able to do a different effect with that later. With that first layer done, we're going to move on to a second layer, this time doing a 1-to-1 mixture of Genesteeler Purple and Morghast Bone. We're going to build up the color, picking out the raised surfaces, but not going all the way up to the edge of what we did before. This is going to start to give the effect of the skin tone changing as we get more to the raised edges. This is the second of 4 layers that we're going to do. Now around the face, we're going to pick it out just as we did before, but again, leaving a little bit around the edges. You can kind of see how it starts to bring out the details of the face really well. And with that done, we're now going to move on to our third layer, which is going to be a 1-to-2 mixture of Genesteeler Purple and Morghast Bone. And at this point, we're starting to really focus on just highlighting the edges. We're not necessarily highlighting the whole bulk of the flesh anymore. We're just picking out the edges and trying to give definition to the model. And it's going to also start looking really tan, almost even yellow at this point. Now with that taken care of, we're on to our last layer, which is just straight Morghast Bone. This is going to be just like before, an edge highlight, but this time we're only picking out the most raised edges and the finest points of the model. I'm going to pick out some of the area around the eyes, the jaw, the chin, and some of the rolls of flesh that are in the neck. Now that the belly is done, it's time to begin doing the red. We're going to start with Mephiston Red. We're going to be careful when we're working around the belly. If we don't want the belly border to extend down in a certain area, we need to be very careful to make sure we don't overpaint. Now we're going to paint this up around the head and the neck, and we're being careful around the head. There are a few spots that I am intending to paint in, and I'm going to do that here in just a second. But I'm going to start by getting the neck and the area around the head, get that nice defined border between the two. We're going to be doing 3 different shades of red, very similar to what we did on the belly. Over the next few steps, you're going to see that start to come together. You'll notice that in here I've done a little bit of extra work around the eyes. I've added in some color that wasn't there to begin with. And that'll hopefully help us start to blend the face with the red flesh that's going to be on the back. So you get a nice transition from tan to that nice red that we're going to be building up. Once our first layer of red is dry, we're going to go through and we're going to shade this down with Reikland Flesh Shade. Now we're doing a very thin layer of shade because this layer is meant to serve as more of a guide to help us figure out where the recesses of the back are, so that we can later highlight with the brighter reds and pick those out in greater detail and with greater accuracy. Once we've let that dry, we're now going to pick out the raised surfaces using Evil Sun Scarlet. Now this is a brighter red than we had before. You're going to want to start picking out where the raised edges of the muscle is. Especially in areas like the leg, there are lots of different rolls of skin and muscle. So you want to take your time and pick those out to try and get the very best definition that you can. Now you notice that here I'm building up the color over time. I paint an area and then I come back to it later and paint more. Now this is because as you do this, you're going to start noticing areas that make sense to have the brighter colors on. And you may not notice those until you've painted the area around them. So make sure you go back and forth and touch this up as you go along. Once that layer is dry, you're now going to go through with Wild Rider Red. Now if you're like me at this point, you're going to start thinking this model looks really out of place. This red is almost more of an orange, and it's very hard to get it to look good without adding a color in the middle. But don't worry, stick with it, because in the next step we're going to use a shade to blend those 3 different colors of red together. At this point, it's important to remember that we're doing more of an edge highlight here, so you really only want to pick out the most raised edges and the details that you really want to highlight. Now you'll notice that around the leg, it's very difficult to get that color to blend properly. It's going to look very out of place, but just remember, stick with it, because we're going to be shading over it later with Reikland Flesh Shade to make it look better. Now before we jump into the shading, we're going to go through with Morghast Bone, and we're going to pick out the different moles and warts that are around the Squig's body. This is just to give us an extra detail later on. And once we're done with that, we're going to take just a little bit of contrast Cygor brown, and we're going to just put a couple dots to kind of add additional moles to the skin. Now you could do this with any brown or black paint. I just used the one that was most readily on hand. Once that's done, we're going to start going over with Reikland Flesh Shade. Now this is a light coat, you don't want to go too heavy here. And you're going to do 2 to 3 coats. I did 3 before I was happy with the shade, but this is meant to just blend everything together. Once the shade is dried, we're going to take Squig Orange, and we're going to dry brush onto the lips. Now this is going to help us blend between the purple and the red on the face. And it's going to give the lips a cool pink tone to them as well. We're going to do the same over all of the flesh, the red flesh that is. And we're going to use this just as an additional way to blend the colors together. Now that we're done with the skin, it's time to start working on the metal parts of the squig. We're going to use Leadbelcher for this. And we're going to start with the leg. Now you want to be careful here. You don't want to get this metal onto the skin. You want to be able to keep those very separate. So use a nice brush that has a good point on it when you're working around the skin. Now we're going to do this on the leg. We're also going to do this on the weapon and the icon that's sitting off the back of the squig. Once that's all done, we're going to take Nuln Oil and we're going to shade all of the metal parts we've just painted. This is going to give them a darker appearance, it's going to make them look a little bit greasy and oily. It's also going to fill in all the recesses for us. Now with that done, we're going to quickly dry brush with Necron Compound. It's now time to work on the saddle. We're going to start with Rhinox Hide as our base color here. We're going to paint this all over the saddle and on the leather straps that go underneath the belly of the squig. We're going to do our best to not get this on the skin, but we're also going to try and get an even, smooth coverage. Once we finish that, it's time to shade it. We're going to use Agrax Earthshade for this. This is going to give it a nice brown, dark tone to it. Once the shade is dried, we're going to go through and we're going to do a combination of dry brushing and stippling using Mournfang Brown. Now this is going to give the leather a worn effect. It's also going to make it so it's discolored and uneven. It's going to help it look a little bit more natural. Now that the saddle's done, we're going to start picking out the teeth, and we're going to use Screaming Skull. Now we're going to be very careful not to get this on the lips or on the face around it. We're just going to work our way in there and get each of the teeth individually. While we're at it, we're also going to use the same color on the handle wrap that's on his weapon that's sitting on his back. Now we're going to use different shades later on to make this look different. With the white parts done, we're going to go through and shade the teeth using Agrax Earthshade. This is going to give the teeth a nice brown, aged look to them. We're then going to take a contrast paint. We're going to use Skeleton Horde, and we're going to paint this on the handle wrap. Now we're going to highlight the teeth using Wraithbone. We're just going to draw little lines starting from the top of the tooth, working our way down. And we're going to just do different stripes. It's going to give the tooth a very natural appearance. With that done, we're going to pick out the eyes. Now I used Averland Sunset. You can use any shade of yellow you want. You're just going to put a dot on each eye. This is going to really make the eyes pop. Once the yellow's dry, you're going to take a black paint. I used Abaddon Black. You're just going to put a little dot right in the center of the eye to serve as the pupil. With that done, we're going to take a bit of Dawnstone and we're going to just highlight the edges of the hoof. Now, I've previously cleaned this up with Abaddon Black, and now we're going to just highlight it, just to give it a little bit of definition. With that done, it's time to do the armor plates that are on the Squig. Now we're using Temple Guard Blue as the base color for this armor. We're then going to later shade this down and then build the color back up. And make sure you don't get this blue on the flesh of the Squig. It's going to really look out of place if you get it on the skin. We're also going to put this on places like the weapon and the jaw of the icon that's sitting on the back. When you do your own, you can really pick out any details you want. With that done, we're now going to shade the blue down, and we're going to use Coelia Greenshade. This is going to give kind of a teal color to our armor plates. We're then going to layer back with Temple Guard Blue. Now we're going to be careful not to go all the way up to the edges of the armor plate, because that would ruin the shading effect that we've given here. Now that that's done, we're going to go through with Balthasar Gold and we're going to pick out any details that we want to pop off the metal. So things like gears, maybe hydraulic tubes, anything that we think needs to be a different color to give some contrast to the metal parts. Now that that's done, we're going to go through with Wraithbone, and we're going to pick out the skull portion of the icon that's sitting on the back of the Squig. If there's any other details you want to do in white, this would be the point where you'd want to do those. Now that that's done, we're just going to pick out a few extra little details. Now I'm doing the tube and the little canister that's on the back of the Squig in Moot Green. This is just to give it an extra little bit of color to pop out and catch the attention. Now you could do this with whatever colors you want, and at this point you could do any other little details that you see fit to put on your Squig. Now that the Squig's done, it's time to start painting the rider. We're going to start with Ogryn Camo as the base color for his skin. This is a little bit pale, but you're going to see that once we shade it, it's going to start looking really nice. It's going to look green. And we're going to paint up here around the face, and we want to be careful, just like when we did the Squig's base colors. We don't want to fill in the details on the eyes or the mouth, so you want to make sure you keep your paint controlled and don't let it pool up too much. And we're just going to paint this everywhere that he has exposed skin. Now we're going to shade the skin using Biel-Tan Green. This is a nice green shade that's going to give it almost a forest green kind of tone to it. We're going to let this get into all the recesses. You can go as heavy or as light as you want here. It'll just change how green the work is. With that done, we're going to start painting Ogryn Camo again. And this time we're going to just highlight all the muscles that are raised, similar to how we did the Squig before. And we're just going to try to go with the grain of the muscles, especially along the chest. There's a lot of opportunities to highlight it differently to make it look like he's got a more defined pectoral muscle. You can also do that with a lot of the other muscles on the bicep. Just really focus on how the muscles are formed. And when you do around the face, you'll want to highlight things like the chin. He's got different layers of his mouth that you can paint that'll help pop it out. You want to paint his eyebrows, as well as the top of his head and his ears. Now we're going to focus on the face of this knob at first. We're going to pick out the Leadbelcher parts on his head. He's got this armor plate that goes over his eye. So we're going to pick that out. And then we're going to go straight to his mouth, and we're going to paint Genesteeler Purple on the tongue. This is going to give it a nice purple, pinkish tongue color. We're then going to shade that tongue with contrast Volupus Pink. And this has been watered down just like we did when we shaded the Squig earlier. With the tongue done, we're going to pick out the teeth. We're going to use Wraithbone for this. We're going to be very careful to not get the white on the lips or on the tongue. We want to just focus on getting the teeth. And while we're at it, we're also going to go and pick out the eyes. I'm going to put just a little white dot in the eye and also in the lens that he has over his other eye. You want to be careful when you do that, because if you overpaint, you're going to have to go back and redo the skin around the eye. And that's just an annoying step you don't want to have to take, so take your time. Now that the eye and the teeth have been painted, we're going to take contrast Blood Angel's Red, and we're going to pick out just the lens. And if you want, you can do the other eye in this color, or you can find another color to shade the eye with, based on your preferences. Now with that done, we're going to start working on the pants. We're going to paint this with Morghast Bone. Now, this is a pretty light color, but don't worry, we're going to shade it down and it'll look a little more normal. But this is going to give us kind of a canvas pant, and that's what we're going for here. Once that's dried, we're going to shade the pants with Agrax Earthshade. This is going to really tan it down. You're going to see it starts to look a lot more tan rather than a cream color. Once it's dry, we're going to dry brush with Morghast Bone. This is going to bring it back to that color we started with, and the result's going to be, like I said earlier, a canvas style pant. Once the pants are done, we're going to start working on the hide. We're going to use Khome Red for this, because I kind of picture this hide being like a corn demon or some other beast of corn. With the red in place, we're now going to shade it down with Carroburg Crimson. This is going to give it a darker tone. It's also going to help seep into the crevices and also give us some contrasting colors going on. Once the shade is dried, we're going to be able to start dry brushing this with Screamer Pink. Now, Screamer Pink is an almost red shade of pink, so it's going to blend really well with this. Now, if you want to add a little bit more contrast to it, you can add just a little bit of tan in with your pink, and that'll bring it out just a little bit more. Once we finish with that dry brushing, we're going to go through with Mechanicum Standard Gray. Now we're going to pick out the spikes on the back. There's claws down on the arm of the hide. Just a couple other little spots that have details on the hide that we can pick out with this gray. With that all done, we're going to start painting the leather straps and the boots. We're going to do this with Mournfang Brown. Now this is a slightly lighter shade than what we used on the saddle leather, and that's on purpose. We want this to be a little bit lighter. And we're going to treat this the same way we did with the saddle. We're just going to use lighter shades of brown for the dry brushing stages. Other than that, it's the exact same process we did for the saddle leather. With that done, we've put the knob on the Squig now. We're going to paint the rest of the details. We're starting with Leadbelcher. We're going to pick out that arm and any other details we might have missed earlier that are done with Leadbelcher. We're going to do the same process on this arm that we did on the leg of the Squig earlier. So we'll shade it down with Nuln Oil, dry brush with Necron Compound, and then pick out details with that Balthasar Gold we used earlier. Now the final step in painting this knob is going to be to paint his shoulder pad. We're going to do this the same way we did the armor plates on the Squig. We're going to start with Temple Guard Blue. We're then going to use Coelia Greenshade to shade it down, and we'll highlight it back up with the same Temple Guard Blue again. Now for an extra little bit of detail, I've taken Gray Seer, and I'm going to paint a skull on the shoulder pad. This is just to highlight the skull that's already sculpted into the shoulder pad. If you want, you can go through with brighter shades of white afterwards and add additional highlights and lines to this. You could even make it dirty using shade paints. That is up to you. It's just a matter of how much detail you want to put into it. And with that, we've finished up our Squig. Now I've also used this paint scheme on my Squig Hog Riders. You could do the same if you wanted. If you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so we can make more videos for you in the future. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to see in the future, specific models you want painted or techniques, and I'll see what I can do. Thank you so much for watching my video today. Have a great day.